Welcome to Live Courageously. And this is Live Courageously podcast show 13 of 2023. And I'm your host, John Duffy. And this is the 29th Live Courageous podcast show since I started the show a year ago. Live Courageously has been the conscious theme of my life for the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And it's also been an unconscious theme for most of my life. If you haven't seen the previous 28 podcasts, with some of my amazing, courageous friends sharing their powerful stories of overcoming all odds, going on to live powerful lives and making a difference in the world. You can watch them on my John Duffy Live Courageously YouTube channel. And I have another, and it just keeps growing, 75 more friends planned to be guests on my future shows. I don't know where I'm going to get to do all this, but it's a great problem to have. So please subscribe to my Live Courageously YouTube channel and keep coming back every week, Sunday at 2 p.m. So why live courageously? Because fear is just a reaction, but courage is a choice. And I suggest you consciously choose courage and faith over fear every time you experience fear to help you get through life and to deal with whatever life may throw at you in the future. And trust me, it will throw stuff at us that we don't like or want. So today, my guest is very special, Dr. Trina Clayeaux. Dr. Trina is Given Hours CEO, and during her first year, she led the board of directors and the staff to reinvigorate the organization and better reflect its mission, its expertise, and its vision for the future by developing a 3-year strategic plan, the impact of which will be felt by the communities they serve as they continue to transform the landscape of mental health. Before joining Given Hour, Trina was Chief Operation Officer for Social Impact nonprofit organizations addressing the educational, the social, emotional, and affordable housing disparities across low-wealth communities. She also served as a director and an assistant dean for both the K-12 and community college systems. As a military spouse, Trina served as the director of workforce and economic development for a county of governments charged with multi-state coordination of base realignment and closure events, and as CEO of a national military spouse and veteran workforce development network, and as a sexual assault response coordinator in support of the Army Family Readiness System. Trina earned a doctorate in leadership studies from Gonzaga University, along with certificate in change management, lean process improvement, and program evaluation. Her master's degree in public administration is from Portland State University, and she has been recognized by the National Association of Development Boards for Innovation and received the Salin Award for Leadership Excellence from Spokane Community College and the Nonprofit of the Year Award from the Chase Foundation. Additionally, Trina has presented at conferences related to human-centered design, trauma-informed practices, and a replication model serving vulnerable populations. In her downtime, what downtime? Trina enjoys athletic activities and completed a full Ironman, 2 half Ironmans, and hundreds of running events. She remains active with her husband and retired veteran of 26 years and 2 children. Wow. Greetings and welcome to Dr. Trina. How are you doing?
Hi, I am doing great. Thank you. It's great to see you again.
Wow, just reading that, I feel like such a slacker.
Really? And I just think, oh my God, this sounds like so governmental. It sounds not really, exciting but there's a lot there.
Well, there is all that, but at the same time, when we get into it and what you do and what your organization in particular, Given Hour, does, it's going to get off of the governmental and into really the practical and the service that's being provided, which I think is pretty amazing. But yeah, I mean, we're going to get into some of all those things that we just talked about. But wow, I'm just like feeling like that's an amazing amount of stuff you've accomplished. So congrats to you for doing all that.
Thank you.
Now, I always start off the show with 2 questions. And most of the people, up until now, with the exception of one guest, has been people I've met in person in real life, not just, through the show or through social media. So my first question is, how did we meet? And your take on it, my take, and we'll go into that, and then we'll go to the second one.
Oh my gosh, we met pretty recently. So we met officially in January, and we were both at Eric Christensen, the creator of Unmasking Hope. We were at his premiere in LA. And I had invited Jeff Daly, who I had only met through his show. So I had never met him in person, but he happened to be nearby. And we were trying to link up ahead of this just to have coffee or something. Eventually I was like, well, why don't you just come to the premiere? And then, of course, he's got a giant personality. So he shows up in all of his Jeffness. And
yes, yes.
he sees you. And it was just, I mean, it was so clear that you two have a history there and a lot of love for each other. But all of a sudden, everything else just dissolved. And I was like, this is the spot I want to be, is between the two of you having these conversations and watching you two really riff off of each other, so much like energy, ribbing each other about stuff. But there was so much love. And then to watch both of you just kind of work so many people there in how you engage with folks. And it really meant a lot. There's a number of veterans who were there unrelated to both of you, or maybe knew you in some different capacities, but really sought both of you out in different ways to feel a connection. And it was just amazing how much you saw them and spent time and were really intentional. And so right then, when you meet people and you're just like, somebody's got the right energy for your life, and both of you were that person for me.
Well, I just echo that. It was like, it was funny how it all kind of connected. And I always kind of say it's obviously somebody's had a bigger plan for this than me, but and who that may be is God. But we got there and it was like I came to support Eric, who I'd seen one of his previous movies, and he did not know that I was coming. I surprised him, which was very cool. And then I come in, I didn't know Jeff was going to be there, and he's the commander of the American Legion. Yep. And like you said, he had you on his podcast show, American Legion podcast show. And then we just, he introduced me to you, and then we just started having fun together, the three of us. Right. And it was and then he started giving me a hard time that I haven't had him on my podcast show. So, so that started us. And then, of course, I have now had him on the podcast show, but then you also, having met you and what you do, and you got up and spoke at the program on Unmasking Hope, and your organization was a big part of supporting Eric with his dealing with trauma documentary that he made. It's on PBS. So I got a chance to get to know a little bit about you by watching you in action and what your organization does. So I was like, okay, I got to have her on my show. And of course, that led to you coming and being here. And then it's kind of funny because the other week I just interviewed a veteran friend of mine who is also a member of Post 43 in Hollywood, Nicholas Comier III. And he's an Air Force vet, and he just ran his 4th marathon. So it's like, you running Ironmans, he's running marathons. I'm more than a slacker now, but and then he told me that he had gotten service because he was homeless for a while and he was dealing with some trauma issues, and he got therapy service from Give an Hour. And so that was, it just all circle around, out of nowhere, we all connected, and we all connected through this. So I'm honored and glad to have you on the show. The second question I always ask, and I think you're an example of it in many levels in service particularly, but what does Live Courageously mean to you, since that's the theme of the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, obviously you've curated this, so much, because I think that you really nailed it, is really addressing and leaning into fear and things that we put in our own way, and really choosing something different. And so I think choosing the other side of that, and how each of us navigates getting on the other side of fear, because that's really, and a friend of mine had always said this, so that's where abundance is, right? And so when you stay on this side of fear, you're holding your life small, and you're holding it tight, and you're holding it very safely, but you're missing out on just everything that's big and exciting and challenging that's on the other side of it. And so I think that, in different ways, we're all addressing our fears, in trying to figure out how to do it in a way that does feel authentic. And I know it's such an overused word now, but when it's your journey, no one else can tell you how to do it. No one else can tell you how to get on the other side. You can hear and get ideas and advice, but you're going to have to be the one who puts the action behind it.
100%. I'm going to put something up from a good friend of ours, a little Jeff Daly.
Oh, Lord, Jeff's here.
So, yes, Jeff's in the house. We got to be careful now.
I'm so glad that he doesn't have you don't have a call-in function. I think that would be calling.
Yes. Well, we may have to do a show with all three of us. I
I
think that's
know.
coming down the road. But just to kind of your journey. I mean, you've done, like I said, so many amazing things, and you started out. You know, you have so much education behind you, and then you went into the nonprofit world. Tell us a little bit about that journey as to becoming Dr. Trina, and what took you into that path and why, and then, you know, share that with us and a little bit of the personal before we get into some of what you do.
Yeah. And I wish I had like this really interesting, like, oh, everything was just so laid out. And then I just followed this path. But I will say, generally, even in the face of like having an easy path and a hard path, for some reason, I will always seem to choose the hardest path. I'm not quite sure why. You know, I'm sure I'll be working that out for, you know, this next chapter of my life. But you know, kind of my early on, I grew up in northern Idaho, so don't know where that is. That's okay, but it's cold there. It's beautiful. It's outdoors, but it's a little isolated, to say the least. And when I was in high school, for just kind of a variety of reasons, I decided to move out on my own and finish school, which in retrospect probably wasn't even the path that you would have been on, you know, just kind of leaving school and not leaving school, I'm sorry, but moving out. And I was working full time and finishing high school. And I started taking some college classes and really I didn't exactly know what I was doing, which I think is kind of prevalent in many things that I do. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. I eventually applied to college. I waited for about a year and a half before I went to college. I do believe I went and took my SATs hungover, which is probably indicative also of like my age, and that I wasn't really thoughtful about this. I was just trying to go to that, you know, the next kind of reasonable step. And so, you know, I've always worked full time, and each time I've gone back for my education, it's always been full time. And I just tend to layer a lot of things on there, which, you know, hasn't always created enough space for me to do a whole bunch of things really well. That's really kind of the path that I took. And early on in my career, I was doing internship as a guardian ad litem, which is like going to court for children who'd been abused, and being their advocate. And I was like, you know, this is actually pretty cool. I really like you know, I'd interview people and you make recommendations. And I was like, oh, this is something I would want to do. And somehow I ended up going from that to graduating college and went right into working at the Parole Commission in Idaho, working for the Commission on Pardons and Parole. So I interviewed inmates and persons who were incarcerated, and did backgrounds and made recommendations. And I did that for about 3 years. And I will say it was fun. It was kind of non-conventional. It was different. It was a lot. And I think at some point I was like, you know, I need to go to the next. And so I headed back to school. That seemed to be my default. Again, didn't know what I was doing. Neither of my parents went to college. So, you know, it was like really trying to navigate a system that I really just didn't know that much about. So someone had told me about public administration. I swear to God, even at the time I signed up, I didn't know what it was. So I was like, sounds like a great degree. So I was probably even 3/4 through my degree, and I'm still like trying to figure out exactly what this is. But it's basically being like a CEO of government. And so I was doing that. I actually went and worked at the Parole Commission, or not the Parole Commission, the Liquor Control Commission. So I was an undercover liquor officer in the state of Oregon. Wow. I know, I was one of 4. You kind of think like I had this impression of like all undercover liquor folks were, you know, like 50s, divorced 15 times, you know. And there was the 4 of us. It was 3 women and a gentleman out of Orange County, California, who used to be a police officer. And that's what we did. So at nighttime, I did undercover liquor. Daytime, I was in college. And then I went back to corrections, which is crazy, as an internal affairs investigator. And I did.
Stop there for a second, and we're going to come back to internal affairs.
Yeah.
That's just another fascinating thing about you, obviously. So doing undercover liquor, what does that mean? What do you do? And I've never heard of it in that sense. So
are you serious? Oh my gosh. I think for sure that would be a whole thing in California. So yeah, so you work for the state, and so the
Right.
state actually has an enforcement side, and so you spend a lot of time. So you go to bars and restaurants, which are all regulated by the state liquor commission,
Right.
and you do. Some people in the office, their job was to be like out there and be educators and, help people with like over service and neighborhood livability. And we monitored like minor entertainers and adult entertainers for like escorting on the side, which is illegal, and drug activity and gang violence and neighborhood livability. So those are all enforceable parts of this. And so that's what we did. So we did, like spring break, I'm on the coast. You'd spend the coast during spring break, which is a lot of like underage drinking. During certain seasons, you might be like going to really rural areas where a lot of like hunters, were out, and there would be over service, or you go to some places that were known to be like it wasn't the Hells Angels. It was like another, it's been a minute, but another kind of motorcycle.
Gang.
I was going to think of a better word, but yes, gang. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And so had really kind of sketchy instances with, identifying like some of the drugs and things like that. And so you
Wow.
do that. And then, then you make
And
yourself
then you
visible.
go on to the next one that you just was mentioning
Yeah.
before I
No,
took you
that's
back to
okay.
that. So then you went into the criminal justice system doing what
Yeah.
specifically?
Internal affairs for the state of Oregon also, and in Ohio, I did it again. I did it twice.
Wow.
And so that was really about staff who were doing illegal things, either administrative or criminal in the system. So a lot of it had to do with abuse of inmates,
Hmm.
could be running like tobacco or drug contraband.
Into the prison systems
Into the prison
illegally. Uh-huh.
systems, but it always has to do inside outside. So everything
Right.
kind of runs outside as well, because you need a lot of family members and friends to run this stuff inside.
Sure.
So we did that. And oh my God, I went out on bus with, getting the state police to pick up my case and going out and raiding homes and doing all the stuff. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in my 30s by now. I need to clean it up. I need to, I need to do something that's, forward.
But obviously everybody goes on a different journey. Some people start out life and they know exactly what they want to do and they go on that path and it works out perfect, right? But most of us don't get to do that usually, and we kind of got to find ourselves and refine ourselves and refine ourselves. And sounds like you did that, but it just kind of sounds to me, listening to you, it takes a form of courage to be able to recreate yourself, to be able to, go down a path, do what you did, and then find yourself and then move on and then kind of recreate yourself again. I mean, that's a form of not staying in a comfort zone, but keep moving forward towards something, even if you don't know what that something is, but you're moving forward, you're taking steps, you're taking action. And in that form, it is courageous. So keep going with that. But I just, in hearing it, I hear that in you.
Oh, I appreciate that, because it's I think it's when you don't set out a path that you're just following, trying to go linear. And I think you're right. Very few people have a linear path. I I don't think I could see what the next. I just know there's a next every time. So I
Right.
do something, and then I'm like, oh, there's got to be something different or something more to this. And so, a lot of my work, even just past that, had to do with working with individuals who are generally at the margins for whatever reason. So I've done workforce development, which was working at the colleges, which was a blast, but it wasn't the traditional student that comes in that's working on a 2-year degree to transfer. It was individuals are coming in, maybe this education hadn't worked out for them, working at career and technical programs, so getting people into kind of quicker programs that'll get them out into a livable wage job. And so it wasn't just, and a lot of times those were adults, they've already had some life behind them. So it wasn't just looking at traditional college students. And I loved it. That works its way into a job that I had also in Spokane when I was on the West Coast. And I ran an education and workforce center for young adults, so 16 to 24. And these are push out, fade out, kick out young adults. And when I got there, we had like 22. I think that was our top enrollment. And when I left 4 years later, we had over 700.
Wow.
And it was word of mouth, and it was an education program. It was to get your GED, but we were also did everything else. And oh my God, it was on fire. Like sometimes it was literally on fire. And we had great work with like the police and with the schools and with the community and with business. And it was hard at times to keep it contained. There was a lot of gang activity and a lot of, violence that our young people went through. I think since I've left, there's like 13, 14 young people who've passed away
Wow.
for various things. And so, it was really serious. And when you had a good group of staff, you had a great thing. And we really just changed it. We tried to do it really different and be really young people led. And we always had like 2 rules. When I got there, we had like 75 rules. It was awful. And when we worked with the young people, and the 2 rules ended up being don't be a jackass and don't smoke weed here, because we had funders come. And sometimes people would have like half of the rule for the day. Somebody couldn't, other people can't do either of them, But we never suspended. We were trying not to kick, young people out. It was always just like, okay, so you just got in a fight in the parking lot. Can you go to math class? Like, let's just get back into it and kind of do the thing. And I really felt like it was successful. And again, as you recreate and redefine what does success mean. And I would really say that every day, no matter kind of what a crap show it felt like the day might have been, for most of our young people, I would say it was a great day for them. And we really tried to make it just feel like they were the most important person who walked in the door. And so I always said it was like the Nordstrom's experience of workforce development, but a lot of people weren't around during Nordstrom's wouldn't realize what that meant.
Well, I identify with 2 things. One, with you, because obvious, like you're talking like finding your path. I mean, I say I'm on my 7th lifetime, and I've had 6 others, and I think I'm hoping to get 2 more because I want to have as much as a cat. But I've kind of gone through, all kinds of things, because I never knew what I was, when I first, I was a high school dropout at 15. My goal was to survive. That was my goal, survival. And then from survival, it went further and further, and I kept moving forward. But so I, related to that. And then at one point when I moved to California in the 90s, I worked as a counselor with runaway kids in Hollywood for 2 years in a program. And I also worked as an overnight counselor with mentally ill patients. So I kind of had a lot of, and the counseling with the kids was awesome. And, being able to take my growing up in a poor neighborhood, a ghetto, being able to take that and just kind of inspire others kind of became a part of my life. And I took it into what I do today and speaking and film and all that. But I had the counseling part of it too. And, doing service is such a great thing. And that's why your organization, and we'll talk about all the layers of what Give an Hour does service wise, and then how people can get involved. But, it's just so important for people to realize no matter what amount of service you can do, even if it's a little bit, it's a blessing to yourself as well as others. You get so much out of it. So if you can find a way to do it, and your organization is one fantastic way for people to get involved, and we'll get into that. But, so you'll keep going with your journey, because there's so much there. And then we're going to pivot in a few minutes to Give an Hour so we can spend
Absolutely.
some time.
Yeah. And I so agree with what you're saying, because I think you don't really know yourself and what you're capable of until you really put yourself in those challenging situations. And especially when you're being of service to someone who you're not trying to change them. You're not trying to push things on them. You're really, and I truly believe in the idea of like meeting people where they're at. And I've worked in a lot of organizations where people say that, and then they give you like 500 rules that people have to do in order for them to work with them where they're at. And so I really was inspired by the people around me who I think pushed against some of those normatives. And then even just moving into the role that I have now at Give an Hour, I want to be that person who says yes more than I say no, because really the answers to the work that we do and the things that people need and the way in which they need it won't come from me. They'll come from people who are close to the work and close to the day to day. And I think that that's where so much of the magic just in any job that I've had is when you really listen to people, and let their ideas spark and like give them fuel so they can see their ideas come to life. It's only a better service to the people that you are there to give back to. And so I think that all of those kind of different pieces have, and a lot of those were in fairly toxic work environments. just kind of by the nature of the work, and then also just some really, crazy leadership and people who I really think probably were good intentioned, but it had gotten so out of control. And so for me, it became my goal that I wanted to be CEO, period, of anything that was in service. And then when Given Hour came about, it just had like all the markings, like everything was there.
Well, that's very cool. I mean, and I like what you said earlier about just those two rules that you have with the kids. Don't, simplify it and make
So
it. Don't be
simple.
a jackass being one of them, because it's real. At the same time, it's that authentic thing of when I was a counselor, we had an experience. I had an experience. I had just started there, and I luckily had some skill, and we were giving out free sandwiches, and I was sitting watching, and a mentally ill man came in, and he started screaming and cursing at the staff. And the staff was intimidated, and they gave him, a little bit more than he asked for even. And then he left. And I said, "Why'd you do that?" And then they said, "Well, why? What can we do?" I said, "Well, let me handle it tomorrow if he comes in." And so he came in the next day, and he started screaming and cursing at me. And so I stood up, and I just started screaming and cursing back at him in the same exact way. And his eyes got wide, and he looked at me, and I said, "Okay, now I got a question for you. Do you want to scream and curse at me? Because I can scream and curse at you, and I could kick you out. Or do you really just want a sandwich? Because if you want a sandwich, the easy thing is just to say, 'Hey, could I please have a sandwich?' And I said, if you say that, maybe I'll give you two. But you got a choice. You can go back to screaming and cursing at me, or you can ask me in a nice way." And he looked at me, and he was like, "Sir, could I please have a sandwich?" I said, "Wow, isn't that easy? So what you going to do tomorrow?" He said, "Sir, could I please have a sandwich?" I said, "See, it makes life a lot easier." I said, "Thanks a lot. Here's two sandwiches." And he leaves, and they're like, "How did you do that?" I said, "Well, he's mentally ill. He got issues, but he wants to survive. And if you let him survive by doing it that way, he's going to do that. And if you give him a better alternative, he'll take that better alternative, because at the end of the day, what does he really want? He wants that sandwich. He doesn't want to scream and curse at me. That's not why he came in."
Right.
So treating people with that kind of, meeting them where they are, understanding who they are, and understand what their need is. Sometimes it takes a little of that awareness. And I think you talked a lot about that, going through the different programs that you worked in, being able to be there for the kids.
Yeah. It's so amazing because you kept it intact too. You kept someone's dignity intact. You're not trying to take from them and make this about you kind of overtaking, or like a power play for somebody who's not even in the power position. And so
Exactly.
to have that much self-awareness, though, because I do know those can be pretty emotionally charging moments.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that you stepped into it with the idea of like really seeing that person as a human who has a need is very different than coming at it either with a savior complex, or with you're going to just put them back in their place because they're yelling. So I think it takes a ton of mental fortitude and emotional maturity to pick dignity first before you engage. So I commend that. That's an amazing story.
Well, thank you. And the people like yourself who are in the arena, who do it that way, you're able to affect people and affect change. I mean, I had a police officer on my show maybe a month or two ago, who works in Skid Row in LA, and he's been a police officer there for 25 years. And he's just such an amazing, powerful human, because he does exactly what you just said. He treats people with that. He treats them with respect, and he changes their lives, because he does what he has to do. If he has to arrest them, he arrests them, but he doesn't take away their dignity or treat them with disrespect. He does his job, and he tries to inspire them to change, to find programs, to get into things that change their life for the better. So when you come across somebody like that, it always resonates with me, because I think those are the people that we need to share their stories more, like yours, because that's what the world needs more of, because people need help. So yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, great.
So let me take. We're going to pivot in. I want to make sure we get into all the things that Given Hour is doing, has done, is continue to do, and how people can get involved in it. So let me just take a moment and put up a quick 1-minute video from you, and then you can take it from there and take us through this conversation about all the things that you've done and been doing. And I'll ask some questions about that. So let me just grab this and put this video up.
Give an Hour is a national nonprofit that provides access to mental health care across the nation. Fear, shock, disbelief. I don't know how I can go on. These are the messages of hopelessness that Give an Hour hears from our service members and families across our nation. Through a national network of volunteer licensed mental health professionals, Give an Hour offers mental health care, peer support, and education resources to active duty, National Guard and Reserve, veterans, and their loved ones. In the US, there's only one mental health provider for every 95 people who live with mental illness. Give an Hour intends to address this issue by growing its network of mental health providers to 50,000 strong. Your combined federal campaign donations will help Give an Hour to grow its provider network and expand our services to include peer support programs, training, and workshops that can help bridge the gap in mental health support. All of our service members gave some gave all, making the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Now it's our turn to take care of them. Let's give back together. Thank you.
All right. Whoops.
Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I know from having read what you sent me that's one part of Give an Hour, obviously with the veterans and veteran services and their families, but it's also beyond that. So why don't you take the time to share what is Give an Hour so the audience can hear what that is, and then I'll start asking you some questions about that.
Sure. So we are a national mental health organization. We were founded in 2005 in direct result to 9/11. And our founder had just this incredible vision of knowing that in 2005, nobody, especially in the military kind of area, weren't talking about mental health. And in fact, it could be really threatening to your career if you were talking about mental health. And so it was really founded on bringing together a national network of licensed mental health providers who would give an hour, so donate an hour of their time to a service member, a veteran, or their loved one. And even in 2005, it was unlimited. It was without barriers. It was definitely at that time a lot of confidentiality. I mean, obviously confidentiality always, but this was really about being able to have a separation between their military and status and getting mental health care. It's certainly over time, obviously that conversation has changed quite a bit, but we're still addressing the issue of stigma and mental health in service area and all areas. In 2015, we did that for a good 10 years, and in 2015, we launched the campaign to change direction, which was really an international, but definitely a national campaign to really address stigma and the stigma with mental health. And it was a pivot point for us as well to begin to talk about what does this mean for making sure that anyone can get access to mental health care. And as you heard the statistic on there, it's 52.9 million, which I think is incredibly conservative, individuals, adults with a mental health condition, and there's 569,000 mental health therapists. So you have just a dearth that cannot be closed by having just more therapists. There's just not enough. And not everyone needs a therapist, but all of us have a part to play in educating ourselves about mental health and what mental health is and what emotional wellness is and what good emotional practices are and how to really listen and respond to other people. And at the end of the day, so much of mental health is about human connection. And so while we have a services side to our house, we also have an education and support side, which is really around educating individuals and communities, but also building peer support networks where people can use the power of their story and their experience to share and listen to others. And there's such a healing energy that goes with that. And then that allows more individuals access to a mental health provider for those who actually need individual counseling. And so that's been that's been our work. I've been there for 2 years now. And so we're working, as you had mentioned before, the strategic plan, but it was really looking at human-made trauma and where can Give an Hour be part of the solution for human-made trauma. So that can be military service, like war. It can be mass violence. We've been working in several communities been harmed by mass shootings. Interpersonal violence. So that can be people who've been affected in the justice system. It can be individuals. We are even working with a corporation right now to help with cybercrime and romance scams and sextortion and individuals who've been harmed in those types of crimes, and putting support groups together for people with other lived experience to be able to help them, and then training licensed providers to walk alongside the journey with them. Of course, the opioid epidemic in California, we have a program there in Southern California really addressing that. And we're trying to look at where do we take that next? Like, where is a good place for us to expand some of that work? So it's kind of whatever you need it to be if you come to us, because it's customized. And so we're not trying to pull some off the shelf product and say, this is your mental health journey, go take it. It's really about listening to people and spending time with them before we try to offer them a comprehensive way in which they can aid in their own healing.
Well, you clearly, as you lay out, the organization has expanded, grown, taken on a new mission, and then taken on other issues besides the military and veterans. And like you said, people who have experienced trauma, all the different layers of what you did. That's how we met, because you were supporting this movie, Unmasking Hope, which is story, and it's on PBS, Eric Christensen. And that's about people who've experienced different forms of trauma, from 9/11 to the borderline mass shootings to the Las Vegas mass shootings, and people who've been sexually abused. And all those issues kind of come together in that documentary. And you supported that, your organization, Given Hour, but you do that in other capacities as well. So now, like you said, with you've taken on all these new things. What is, in your opinion, now you've been here with 2 years, and you've been in, I would think personally, 2 of the hardest years in the sense, or because the pandemic and the lockdowns and the lack of social connection seems to have created more mental illness in the population, because as people gotten more isolated, whatever problems they may have had before have now kind of intensified, unfortunately. So people tend to need more help now, maybe even than 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's, on so many levels. So what's your experience with that? How do you see the landscape today in mental health in general, and then what you're doing to address it?
Yeah. Oh boy, it's layered, isn't it?
It is.
I think we've noticed kind of a combination between more people coming and less people coming in some ways, because I think for some, stigma has been addressed in how they were experiencing mental health, let's say pre-pandemic. And then certainly there's just been a lot more conversation and a lot more openness to have those conversations. And then I do think there's segments of the society that, for a variety of reasons, there is additional stigma associated with it. We know, like, our SOF community or special forces community sometimes tends to be heightened levels of stigma that go with that. Certain cultures, there's heightened stigma. We've been working with individuals who are military and veterans who are working with Afghan resettlers. And we know that that's been layered, and we've been helping in providing really customized mental health support for the helpers. And they're dealing with layers of stigma for individuals that they're serving who are coming from Afghanistan, who helped us during the war. That is really cultural and very gendered. And I mean, there's language, and there's not really a mental health system the way that we know in the United States. So you don't have a clean crosswalk there. So I think that's part of like why we spend so much time trying to get in with the people that we're serving, to really understand what your wants and needs are. So then we can go back and tailor that. So everything feels like it lands, rather than, 60% of it was useful, but 40% wasn't. We're not looking for that as good, a good response to mental health care. I think the other is children, is that while we don't, tend to be mostly an adult, many of our things are gearing towards helping adults help their children. Because there's just not enough child therapists out there to get care. I mean, you could be waiting I mean, and I have seen waiting lists that are more than a year. This is with insurance. And the other kind of part of it too is access to care. Oh my God, I told you it was so layered. It's just access to care is that even with great insurance, you may not be able to get into a therapist. And the other part is that there's a whole segment of the population that would benefit that maybe can't access care because they don't have either insurance or the network or the money for the co-pays. So much of what we've been looking at is accessibility and equity in care. And so part of that is you're having to take care of therapists and help train them to work with individuals that have a human-made trauma that they may not have had experience with in their training and their education. And then on the other side of that is how do we really leverage the power of people in healing and peer support by bringing people together with shared experiences and help them help heal each other. And that the unmasking hope that you mentioned, you saw Molly in there, and Molly's an employee at Given Hour, and she was involved in 2 mass shootings within not even 14 months of each other. She was in the Vegas Route 91 festival, and then 13 months later, she was in the Borderline bar shooting that was on college night. And I think that having someone like her who has taken this experience, this very traumatic experience, and channeled it into helping other people with that experience is something that a person who's been involved in a mass shooting is not going to get in a lot of places. And to have her be able to bring these network of individuals together from shootings from before to ones that were more recently involved, and be able to be really genuine and be able to talk about how it helped her. It is an incredible healing way and has so much legitimacy to it that this works and this can work for people, and that you don't have to suffer quietly alone. Like there are other options, and they're not options you have to pay for because of how we operate with writing grants and contracts and donations and things like that. We can offer these services without another burden for a family that's already taken a lot of burdens. And that's just one example.
Well, I watching, as powerful as the movie Unmasking Hope was, and it was very powerful on so many levels, but was even more powerful for me and maybe for other people in the audience was having the Q&A after the movie and listening to people like Molly and listening to people share of that journey from trauma through recovery, through continuing to recover and building the resilience to get through. And each one of them had unique stories with unique forms of trauma that was caused by different types of situations. But all of them, it was just so powerful to hear it in person. And I think, it just lets people know that, it gives people hope. I mean, I think that's one of the things that came out of it. And I think, you hear it and you realize that people need, especially people who've been through trauma, need a message of hope. They need something that can give them that strength. And that's what you're doing with that particular partnership, but also with the other partnerships that a Given Hour is doing as well. I'm going to just put up Jeff's comment here. He said, Molly and her story touched my soul. What resilience she has, and the Given Hour services are greatly enhanced by that perspective. Powerful is exactly correct. Thank you, Jeff. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you really felt that each of those individuals were accessible to someone else. And I watched it in the room. There were so many people who the stories that were told really sparked their ability to say, oh, by the way, I had been sexually assaulted, or I had this experience. And I know after the premiere and even after the Q&A, people were still coming up and offering a connection to that. And that's why, stories and people being able to share their stories and people feeling heard in a support way is so therapeutic. Because so often you do feel alone. You feel like you're the only one, and the feelings that you're feeling aren't natural or normal. And then when you hear from someone else who's like, oh my God, this is how I experienced it, all of a sudden you're like, oh geez, I didn't know that would happen to someone else. And the California one was so different too, because it was place-based in, the incident was in Vegas, but so many people affected lived in California. So they were really far removed from traditional services and supports.
Right.
And so that's again some of those layers of complexity that goes with it. But what I really love about this is coming with like curiosity, coming with not with the answers. Like we have the experts, we've got therapists, and they are experts and they are amazing, but we're not coming with the answer. We're coming with the questions, and we're coming with listening, and then asking like, is this what you want and need? Is this how? And then really checking with people as we're doing it. And I think having that combination is what, for folks like Molly, as an example, it worked because she had a big voice in her own recovery, in her healing, and still does.
No, absolutely. And just want to agree and echo, listening to people and really listening to them is so powerful, because and not always feeling like, well, here's the answer. Let me tell you what the answer is, because that's not what, in general, in life, people need that. But, after trauma is even less so, that you need somebody who knows everything to tell you the answer, but you need to go through the process, and you need people to listen to you and understand you and what you're feeling uniquely, because it's a unique experience you're having. And if you can build that rapport and that understanding, then you're going to be able to build a relationship that's going to help that person go through that journey together. So yeah, I say 100% agree. Just volunteer opportunities, and we'll come back maybe depending on time a little bit more, but I want to make sure we get this in. I know I saw 3 levels of ways people can volunteer: both mental health professionals, their ability to volunteer, corporate advocates and people with corporations in partnership with Give an Hour, and then what you call wellness ambassadors. And then I think there may even be another one just called ambassadors. Right. But if you could just take people through that, how they're going to volunteer. At the end, I'll put up the contact information. But if you can explain how, depending on who people are, if they're therapists, or if they've got a corporation, or if they got an organization like the American Legion to connect with you, what are the ways that everybody can connect with Give an Hour and be part of this, even down to the level of an individual given an hour?
Given an hour. Absolutely. So providers is one. So we do have a goal of growing our provider network to 50,000. Which is 10%. So I mentioned before, 569,000 therapists. So we're really looking at holding 10% of that market in being accessible to individuals who need individual therapy. Those tend to be our military members, veterans, and loved ones. And then we also have some, kind of one-offs where somebody might be involved in another kind of incident where we would lean into that network. But in turn, we give back to those providers. Last year, we did 17 trainings for those providers based on what they told us they wanted. And so it was really responsive. It was like, we would love to hear from this subject matter expert or this author. And so we would bring those individuals in. And then we also do continuing education credits. And for therapists, especially private practice, those sometimes are gold. So we actually underwrite those with grants, and allow them to earn their continuing education credits through us. So we do try to give back. And then we have opportunities for contracts of teaching and training when we have individuals and corporations come to us looking for psychoeducation training for their organization. So multiple opportunities for our providers. We do try to pour a lot back into them. Our other is corporate partners, which is always an amazing lockstep. So individuals who have a mission that they're interested in mental health, they may have a particular population that they're interested in, or just the way in which that we're offering and operating mental health services. And so that often is like a side-by-side. Sometimes they run fundraisers internally and do a company match. Sometimes they're on our boards and advisories, helping us like make sure that we're taking into account what's happening kind of out in the world, and making sure that we're being reflective of that, whether it's workplace wellness and mental health, or individuals, businesses who've had employees who've been affected by human-made trauma. And, but I will say the companies that have walked alongside of us, and, I can name a number of them that are, national companies, and then also local kind of more mom and pop who really want to be part of a solution. And, we fortunately keep a very low overhead. And so our money, generally, all of it is going out the door, back out for services. And so I'm really proud of the way in which we operate there as well. And then we do have wellness ambassadors, and this is just a way for anybody to get involved and really elevate your mental health EQ. And so you'd become an ambassador, and we have some ideas for really mobilizing those. But they would be great for corporations who want to have more individuals on staff, because who's the first person you usually go to at work? It's usually not your supervisor, it's a colleague. And so the more that we know what to do, what to say, how to say it, when somebody actually needs help that is outside of your help, your ability to help, but it's giving resources and psychoeducation, just being able to say that anybody and everybody has a role to play in supporting each other in mental health. And then we do have ambassadors, and I know I introduced you to one of our ambassadors, but we have an actress, we have a now retired boxer, we have Eric Christensen. We have individuals who have a passion and a platform who are just talking about their experience and what they know in the day-to-day. And really, again, it's a lot about destigmatizing mental health. And when you have people who you know and trust, and some, even if it's on Instagram, but it's somebody that you're following, it has a lot of power. It has a lot of influence to say, it's okay. And you can reach out and get help.
And you mentioned Eric Christensen as a ambassador, obviously, and he's very unique in the movies that he's done, and obviously in Unmasking Hope, because his level of empathy and ability to connect with people is so powerful, and you can see that he really builds that rapport and understands their story in a level that I think everybody can model. So is there, like, for you, training on that as well for people? Obviously somebody wants to be an ambassador for a given hour. Yeah. You want to give them the skill sets and the mindset to understand how they can play an effective role by understanding mental health, understand how to communicate with people, all those things. So what kind of training do you provide to somebody who wants to get involved and do something like that?
Yeah, so we do. We have actually a person on staff who's dedicated to our ambassadors. And her work is so much about some of that. It's really training. It's talking about, like, understanding how, given our, kind of the what and why and the how that we operate, but also connecting to their story and what it is that's driving them. So many individuals have had, and I would say all, now that I'm thinking about it, have had a personal experience. Either they have experienced themselves or a family member that really called them into this level of service. And then we often will take up a passion project and help walk alongside to bring that to fruition. So right now we're working with Stephanie Shostak, who's an actress on A Million Little Things. She's got lots of other things that she does, but we've been working with her on a passion project called Selfish, and it's a workbook and it's an app. And we've got the cover, we've got all the write-ups, like everything's in production. And Nikki's just working alongside her just to keep all the steps moving forward and kind of running interference when we get hung up. But it'll be such a great gift, because not only will it be her being able to get something that's worked for her in her acting career and in her personal life, but now we will have ability to use it and to make it accessible to customers and clients who come to us to see if it's something that they can use. And again, just building it into the things that we do. And so again, this goes back to saying yes to people, right? Is like, why wouldn't you say yes to this? I don't know what it's going to look like. I didn't know, all the ins and outs of it, but I know that Stephanie was passionate about it, and we should get behind that, because she's the one who will drive that passion into it. And then we had it vetted, and we had therapists on our board and elsewhere, go through and do the fine tuning. But you can't replace passion, and you can't replace people who've had a lived experience. And she has a very personal one to this. And so those are the things that we get to do with the ambassadors. And then we continue to provide them training and support and help them just see places where they can show up that would make a big difference.
Well, I think you're right about saying yes to things. I think people sometimes underestimate how how great that is when you do say yes, and you say yes to an opportunity, even if you don't know where it's going to lead you. I know that for myself, it's been, just like me going to that screening led me to meet you.
Yeah.
You introduced me to somebody that I will have a chance to at some point bring on the show.
Yeah.
And every time you say yes, at least I find my world just expands, and it gives me more opportunities to give back and share and to help. So it's like, it's just the right way to live. If you can find a way to always say yes. I mean, obviously there's a point where maybe you can't, but in general, I think most of us can say yes most of the time. And it's a good thing when we do.
I agree. Your life just gets bigger and better when you do. So I agree. And a lot of times I don't think too much about it, which is probably a problem, but I will say at the end of it, it always works out.
I would agree.
Yes, pretty fast. I'm like, yes, that's a great idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree. So in kind of trying to sum up, I mean, you've been through a whole a lot of stuff. Obviously, like we talked earlier, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're juggling a lot of things, and and an athlete, and you're still doing all this stuff. What's the message, purpose of your life, going forward? And like you said, you don't have to know. Sometimes you just keep working it out. That's fine. What do you see as kind of like because I think people, when they have a purpose and mission, whatever it is, it can be small, it can be large, but when you have a reason to do things, your life is fuller. You're able to have a more accomplished. When you don't have any purpose and mission, and that's true for veterans, when they come out and lose a purpose and mission, they lose something that's special, and they need to refine a purpose and mission, a purpose and mission. And whether in service or something like that, I think is a good thing. But what's yours, and what would you suggest for the audience?
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I think that it, at least for me, it's hit me in different seasons of my life. So I would say 10 years ago, I would have had a totally different answer to this, but I feel like right now it's really about, well, I mean, it's always been about other people. I will say that starting with, it's about other people, but it's using what you can now to advance the betterment of other people. And so I think before 10 years ago, I would have been in a different position where I could make some changes, but I couldn't affect them at all levels. And I feel like now my role is really to listen to other people tell me why they can't access care, why they aren't able to find a therapist, why they can't help somebody that's come to us, and break that down. And now that I feel like I'm in a position, in a role where we could just either start doing stuff or stop doing things that don't make sense, it opens that up so much more. And so you really are just navigating things and really going after the artificial, and a lot of times it's artificial barriers that prevent people from getting what they want and need. And so I feel like that's been, at least in this role, I'm really am committed to helping our team figure out how to remove the logistical barriers between somebody seeking care and somebody getting care. And a lot of times, sometimes you're in your own way. And I think that we figured a lot of that out. It's like, well, we have to fill out this form. It's like, but they don't care about a form. Like, how do we bridge this distance faster? How do we make sure our therapists are engaged and can accept someone quickly? How do we make sure that we can follow up on care without interfering with the care that somebody is getting? So there was just a lot of those kinds of pieces. And now that I can say yes to a lot, it can be more like, well, what if we didn't do this? I was like, it sounds great. Stop doing it. And then that's it, so it helps change and it helps challenge a lot of things that we think are just conventional or we think are just in place. Like you can't touch it. It's just how we've done it. And I think that we're really undoing that. And we're saying we actually don't have to do it that way. And I think when you deeply listen to someone else, the answer's there. They have the answer. They're telling you what they want and need. And so your job is to fix that middle piece. And so to me, the details are in that gap, in that gray area where everything gets stuck. And really at this role, that has been my purpose, is to break those down so our team can do what they need to do to make sure that people are taken care of.
Well, I love that because even when I worked in as a counselor in mental health and in that field as well, but in other fields, the thing that always bothered me was bureaucracy and red tape and all this stuff that you had to do, but you really didn't have to do, and just got in the way of the bottom line, which is being of service and getting the solution and getting people helped, which, even if it means going outside the box and finding creative ways to solve it, you do. And so you're in a position now as a CEO to be able to impact that as a leader of the organization. But I just think that's such a great thing that you have that purpose and mission, because that's how you get more people served and helped. So I commend you for having that point of view and that approach to things. Like, let's make it simple. Let's get them to service. Let's find a way. And that's a great attitude to have. 100%.
Yeah. And I think it changes your life as the staff member too. I mean, it's an empowerment across the board, but to feel like you have more say and equitable say in your work, I think is an incredibly powerful. And it's probably one of those, kind of toxicities that I've dealt with over the years that I really am desperately to undo. And so, but it takes a lot of time and trust. And I felt really proud of our team because they have leaned into some really difficult, conversations and vulnerabilities. And, I think none of us love to feel vulnerable. And, we have to keep building that trust, because at the end of the day, the better that we can work together as a unit, the more we can get people served and get them into what they want and need. So it is just locked in. It feels right, feels like this was made for them, and people can start their healing journey and then hopefully share that with others. So we have more and more people who can help one another. It's a huge capacity builder.
Absolutely. I'm going to put up on the screen. Obviously, people can go to givenhour.org to contact and to volunteer on whatever level that they're able to volunteer on. They can donate to givenhour.org at Given Hour. And this is one of the places where you can get the information, right?
Yeah.
This is your Director of Communications and her contact number and email. So you can go here, and then you can find Given Hour on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. So you got many ways to stay in communication with Given Hour and be able to participate. Anything else you would like to close with? It's been great. It's great. You're my first doctor on the show, but so Dr. Trina, it's been a pleasure and an honor to. I'm just so glad that I said yes that night and ended up with that screening. And got a chance to hang with you and also hang with Jeff, which is always an experience. So that was great.
I know we should have totally grabbed you for the afterward too. I don't know what I was thinking, but things were going. There's so many things happening. But yes, I need to make it back to SoCal and somehow.
And I'll give you. This is what Jeff said earlier, which is kind of what was going on that night. Just what he said. So that's what I have to put up with him. But very true, Jeff. Very true, man. Anything else you would like to close on? And once again, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you're doing with this. And I recommend that people check out Given Hour, go to the page, givenhour.org, take a look at what they're doing and find a way, if you can just give a little time, give it. If you, whatever capacity you are, be an ambassador, help spread this. It's a great cause, and I think it's changing people's lives.
I appreciate that, and thank you. Just thank you for giving us a chance to highlight that. And again, it was so great to see you at Eric's premiere. So I appreciate you.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. You have a fantastic day. I'm going to close out the show and look forward to seeing you in LA in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Everybody's been watching the show and Dr. Trina's message today of service and hope and volunteerism and making a difference in the field of mental health for both veterans and military people and other people who've experienced trauma. So you can support them. You can go to givenhour.org and support them, donate or volunteer your time. So I hope you take the time. And the message I think was very empowering. No, it was for me. Join us every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And next week, I have a guest and a friend, Elvis Leone, who's an Army veteran, a filmmaker, and a documentarian. And he has a powerful story and a work in progress documentary entitled Somos Leones, We Are Lions, that is about a kidnapping of a family member, and it's a very powerful story. So you're just going to have to see the trailer next week. So I hope you join us. Keep on coming back every Sunday and meet the great friends that I've been blessed with. And I encourage you to choose to live courageously, make your life a masterpiece. And God bless you until next Sunday.